I have a story for you this morning entitled Naboth's Vineyard. There was a man named Naboth. And this Naboth owned a vineyard close to the palace of King Ahab. One day, King Ahab decided he wanted that vineyard for his own, since it was so conveniently located beside his royal property. Of course, the king had acres and acres of land at his disposal, but his desire was for Naboth's land. So the king approached his subject with a proposal. "If you will give me your vineyard so I can plant a vegetable garden," Ahab said to Naboth, "I'll give you another vineyard in return, or I will pay you outright what your vineyard is worth." It sounded like a fair deal to Ahab, but Naboth rejected the offer. He said to the king, "The Lord forbid that I should give my ancestral inheritance to you." Now, Naboth wasn't trying to be stubborn, nor was he holding out for a better offer. It's just that the vineyard wasn't really his to sell in the first place. See, when Naboth's people, the Israelites, settled in that territory some 500 years earlier, each family was given an allotment of land that was passed down from generation to generation. The law stipulated that their land couldn't be sold because, according to Leviticus chapter 25, verse 23, the land belonged to God, and the Israelites were just tenants there. So Naboth was truly forbidden to give his inheritance, his allotted land, to the king. Well, Ahab was unhappy with his law-abiding citizen. He sulked all the way home from Naboth's house, and when he got to the palace, he went to bed dejected and cranky, as a king will do. He even refused to take a morsel of his royal dinner. But Ahab knew in his heart, and more importantly, he knew in his mind, that the land really wasn't supposed to leave Naboth's care. So he didn't press the issue. And the matter seemed to be settled. It was settled, in fact, until Ahab's wife, Queen Jezebel, got involved. Jezebel scolded Ahab for his behavior, not because he was acting like a big old baby, but because as the king, Ahab should be able to take whatever Ahab wanted, regardless of who he might hurt or use or manipulate in the process. Ahab should have told Naboth how the cow ate the cabbage, but he didn't. So Jezebel would take care of the situation. And because Ahab wanted what he wanted, he didn't interfere with the queen's plans. So Jezebel wrote some letters in Ahab's name. And she sealed those letters with Ahab's royal seal. And she sent those letters to the elders of Jezreel, the town where Naboth lived. In the letters, Jezebel told the elders to gather up an assembly of people and to sit Naboth in a prominent position, a place where everyone could see him. Then two scoundrels, two men who had no scruples at all, would accuse Naboth of cursing both God and the king. These were offenses that were punishable by death. Well, when the elders of Jezreel received those royal letters written by Queen Jezebel in the name of King Ahab, they followed the instructions to the letter. Now, why they allowed such a terrible drama to take place, it's very hard to say. Maybe they were indebted to the king. Maybe they were frightened by his power. Or maybe they were men with no scruples at all. Whatever the case, Jezebel's horrible plot was carried out. An assembly was gathered. Naboth was seated in view of everyone, and in view of everyone, he was falsely accused of blasphemy and treason. The accusations mounted, a mob rose up against him, and an innocent man was taken outside the city walls and stoned to death. Each member of the assembly picked up rocks of all shapes and sizes, and they hurled them at poor Naboth with as much force as they could manage, until his body was broken, his bones were crushed, his skin was bruised, and his blood freely flowed. Naboth's only crime was being less powerful than the king. His only treason was having no defense against Queen Jezebel. But you see, these are the rules of oppression. When Naboth lay dead on the ground, Jezebel's evil scheme was complete. As soon as she heard the news, she told Ahab to take possession of his vineyard. And without asking a single question, the king took for himself what he had coveted in his heart. It was at that point that God sent the prophet Elijah to King Ahab. The Lord had seen this whole miserable event unfold. God knew what Jezebel had done and what Ahab had allowed to happen. The king had put his desire for material possessions over and above his love for his neighbor and his love for his God. He sold himself to evil, and as a result, his dynasty would come to an end. And God sent Elijah to deliver the verdict. I'm going to bring disaster on you, Elijah told the king, and cut off from Ahab every last male in Israel. It was a bold move on the prophet's part because the punishment seemed so very harsh due to the fact that it was countercultural to Ahab's practice of selfish manipulation. But to those to whom this wicked king manipulated, the prophet carried the voice of God into a situation that cried for God's intercession and God's presence. Injustice always cries out for God's intercession. Iniquity implores the Almighty to see and to hear the crimes that we commit against each other. It pleads with the divine to correct our abuse of the land that God has allotted to us. And in the midst of this clamor, this crying out for hope, we are either guilty of conspiracy, like Ahab and Jezebel, or we, like Elijah, carry the voice of God. A week ago, we heard the story about Elijah wrapping his cloak around his new protege, Elisha. And we learned that that cloak served as an invitation to Elisha. It was an invitation for him to enter into a new kind of relationship with God, a prophetic relationship. And as we talked about that story last Sunday, I said to you that in endless ways, God invites us to wear the cloak of the prophet. God invites us to wear the cloak of the prophet. God calls us to bring God's intercession and God's presence into a world that cries out for hope. A world like TJ's, a world that belonged to these men on the back row. A world where suffering is a way of life, and where oppression and being oppressed is just a way of being. It is officially autumn. Change of subject, it is officially autumn. Were you aware of that fact? Yes. So autumn means football, right, Bessie? And it means cooler weather and pumpkin harvest. I have 3 more pumpkins turning orange, even as we speak. Autumn means that the leaves will change colors and fall off the trees. And if you are a United Methodist pastor, autumn means that you're filling out a whole bunch of forms in order to get ready for your church conference. And that's what we've been doing around here lately. We have been filling out forms. We've been meeting in committees and talking about things, and the secretary has been typing like a madwoman because we have been filling out forms. And it's kind of like, oh, I don't know, church, it's kind of like a drudgery. But there is one particular report we're required to fill out that I try to take seriously, and that is called the Report of the Administrative Council. I try to take that particular report seriously because it does, and it should, bring the church body to a place of introspection, a place of looking inward and asking some important questions. Questions like, how are we living out the commandment of Jesus Christ to love as he has loved? Questions like, how are we being the body of Christ? You know, a gathering of people can be called many things, but that gathering cannot be called the body of Christ unless it wears the cloak of the prophet and carries the voice and the presence of God to those who are suffering. Now, Trinity United Methodist Church may never stand in a place where we will announce the inevitable end of a wicked political regime like Elijah did. We may never predict the fall of monstrous empires or corrupt corporations that rob people of their dignity and that threaten all of God's creation. That may not be our work. But where can we offer hope to those who are oppressed? Where can we intercede for the victim? Where can we speak peace in the midst of conflict? Where can we be that love of Christ that overcomes hatred? Christ has called us to a countercultural life, to be in the world but not of it. And as